Norway looks its lone wolf in the eye. The trial of far-right terrorist Anders Behring Breivik has opened in Oslo and offers a first glimpse into the 33-year-old killer's personality. 6 unarmed soldiers in blue caps put a tentative UN presence on the ground in Syria. The group are charged with monitoring a 4-day-old truce, even as shells continue to fall. And last chance to woo the French electorate. The 10 presidential hopefuls have just 6 days to convince voters to carry them through to the second round face-off. Hello, I'm Nadia Sharbi. Thank you for watching France 24. And before we develop those headlines, let's go to New York for the opening bell on Wall Street. Our financial correspondent is standing by. Hello. There's positive US data this Monday with a solid rise in retail sales. Is that having any impact, Hoda?
Well, it is having an impact on the Dow Jones and the S&P, but the Nasdaq is sharply lower this morning. It did open positive, but then it turned lower because the technology sector is under pressure. So let's start with the numbers. The Dow Jones up by 0.7% right now. The S&P is slightly up by 0.1%. However, the Nasdaq lower by 0.7%. Both Google and Apple, is important to mention, are lower this morning and by about 3%, which is putting pressure on the Nasdaq. As you mentioned, retail sales coming in much better than expected. They rose by 0.8% and much, which is double what economists were expecting, and it's a clear indication of economic growth. On the other hand, we have the Empire State Manufacturing Index. This index measures manufacturing activities in the New York region, and it fell sharply in April to reach 6.6 from 20.2. Economists were expecting a reading of 18, so a very disappointing report. On the corporate front, we have Citigroup reporting its earnings. It made a profit of $2.93 billion during the first quarter of the year, and the stock is up by 2.8%. And then just moments ago, we got the National Association of Home Builders Index, market index, and it came in at 25, which is slightly below what was expected. As far as the currency, the euro is lower against the dollar, is trading at 130.34 right now, and this comes as the Spanish bond yields rise again and surpass the 6%, and oil prices are essentially unchanged. They're down by just 2 cents right now at $102.81.
Okay, Hoda Osman reporting there from the New York Stock Exchange. Thank you very much for that. Well, let's go back now to our top story. I admit to the acts, but not criminal guilt. Those were the words of Anders Behring Breivik on his first day in an Oslo court this Monday. The 33-year-old admitted to planning and executing the bomb and shooting massacre that killed 77 people last July. But he insists he was acting in self-defense to protect his country from what he describes as the perils of multiculturalism. Well, the trial is being filmed and broadcast worldwide, and as expected, Breivik has used his time in court as a platform for his extremist views. The young man, who smiled intermittently throughout the day's proceedings, defiantly rejected the judge's authority and flashed a closed-fist salute as soon as his handcuffs were removed. Well, just earlier, we spoke to Oslo correspondent Nina Berglund for the latest.
There certainly has been a very, very massive public debate over this during the last 9 months. Even some of the leaders of the youth organization, they have wanted to limit what he has to say. There's been a lot of media self-censorship here in Norway where they're trying to protect, or they don't want a lot of his extremely offensive remarks to come out. But in the Norwegian legal system, all criminal defendants have the right to explain what they did and defend themselves, and so does Breivik.
And that will begin tomorrow. Now, the big question in this trial is, of course, of Breivik's sanity. Did today's first hearing provide any answers in his attitude, perhaps?
Well, today he showed in the early morning hours of the testimony there was absolutely no emotion, a few smiles, as you mentioned in your report, the Nazi salute. But towards the end, just before the lunch break, he did break into tears when a propaganda video that he had put together himself was shown to the court. And a psychiatrist said later that that was the first sign of his mental state, but that it more reflected possibly a very narcissistic attitude, and that he is very self-upptatt, as they say in Norwegian, very conceited and very, very concerned about his own cause.
And a press conference with the lead judge, chief prosecutors and defence attorneys is due to begin in the coming minutes. We'll bring you that live as soon as it begins. Moving to other world news meanwhile, 11,117 people have been killed in just over a year of unrest in Syria, and almost 8,000 of those casualties are civilians. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights announced the new death toll this Monday, adding that 55 people have died since a UN-backed ceasefire was declared 4 days ago. Well, as the shells continue to fall on the opposition hub of Homs, UN monitors are starting to arrive in Damascus. 6 unarmed soldiers are opening the way for a handful more later this week.
Homs 5 days into the ceasefire. The military bombed the rebel neighborhoods of Khaldia and Bayada, and rebel fighters launched new attacks. At the same time in Damascus, the UN observers started their mission. While many are skeptical about what the observers can achieve, the head of the mission tried to remain positive.
We are going to organize ourselves in order to be ready to do our task as soon as possible.
Are you optimistic about your mission in Syria?
Of course, we are here. We are always. All peacekeepers are optimistic.
The observers' first goal is to convince the Syrian government to let them travel freely. They believe that's the key to success. The Syrian opposition agrees.
We know that the arrival of the Arab League observers last time brought some respite, so we support dispatching international observers to Syria, who should be more professional this time.
At first, the Syrian regime was reluctant to accept UN envoy Kofi Annan's 6-point plan. Now it says the UN mission could serve its interests.
We hope that the UN Security Council can remove the current sanctions on Syria from Western countries.
25 other observers will arrive in Syria in coming days. The UN hopes to send 250 extra monitors as soon as possible.
It's time for talks in Mali as the transition gets underway following last month's military coup. After putschist officers spent Sunday haggling with politicians over the details of the return to democracy, this Monday Tuareg rebels met with Malian authorities to discuss their unilateral declaration of independence in the north of the country. Our correspondent Marine Olivesi explains.
Different parties reached an agreement yesterday in Ouagadougou, but many problems remain unsolved. The question of the length of the transition period led by the interim president, Diakounda Traoré, which is one of the key problems, hasn't been resolved. The military officers say that Traoré should only be in power for 40 days, while the civilians on Traoré's side say he should be given up to 12 to 18 months to organize elections and hand over power. So there was one key result in this week's negotiations, though, and that's the nomination of a prime minister. 3 names have been shortlisted so far, and the final decision should be announced within the next 48 hours. Politicians in Ouagadougou over the weekend have called for talks with rebels holding the north of the country, and Islamists holding key towns there also said that they were ready to open dialogue. A humanitarian corridor could be set up to channel food and medical assistance, but without Western help. The Islamist group Ansar Din set already one condition to those negotiations, and that they don't want Western countries or NGOs to play any role in it. So Ansar Din said yes to negotiations with Bamako, but no to any kind of Western interference.
Meanwhile, Switzerland has confirmed that a female national was kidnapped in Mali's northern city of Timbuktu. Swiss authorities are in contact with the woman's family and say they're making every effort to ensure the kidnapped victim is released unharmed. The woman hasn't been officially identified, but local reports describe her as a Christian woman in her 40s who'd lived in the ancient city for years and refused to leave after it fell into rebel hands. Well, let's go back now to our top story. Anders Behring Breivik spent his first day in an Oslo court this Monday. The 33-year-old admitted to planning and executing the bomb and shooting massacre that killed 77 people last July. But he says he was acting in self-defense to protect his country from multiculturalism. Well, a press conference is due to begin in the coming seconds. We can perhaps dip in to see where that is standing now. Let's take a listen.
Criminal trial, and that's why we want to do the best piece of work possible, and that can be quite a challenge. From NRK, Daily News, we saw that the defendant displayed emotion and started to weep when we saw the video played about his manifest, but no emotion concerning the government district and the phone call. So what's your reaction to the defendant's conduct in court? We have no comment. We saw the same as you did, and his reactions during the proceedings is something that we'll have to come back in our closing arguments. We're not going to comment his conduct or his reactions here in court. Certainly not to the media. Peter Dalos. Peter Thaler, NTB. Mr. Lippestad, Defense Counsel, indicated that it might ask for a postponement of the proceedings. How would you respond to this kind of request? Well, it presupposes a formal request for a postponement, and I have difficulty that such a request will be produced. And if it is produced, we'll take a stand on it then and there. But as I said, we don't think this kind of request will be submitted, so we'll have to wait and see. Why did you wait until Friday before sending over the last pieces of evidence to the Defense Counsel? Why so late? Well, this case has been investigated right up until the main trial, and that's one of the consequences of this, that a pile of documents arrives on the defense's desk at such a late hour. But of course, this is related to topics that will be dealt with quite late in the proceedings, so we firmly believe that they will have the opportunity of preparing properly for dealing with these aspects of the case. Sira Amundsen, VG, you shown Breivik's propaganda film in its entirety. What's your assessment? Is it to desiccate or his image of the world and the reality? Well, as my colleague said in his opening statement, we had serious hesitations about this, but we concluded that we wished to project this trailer because we believe that everything that he stands for should be elucidated and demonstrated, and it's going to be important for the court when they reach a decision as to what he is and what he represents. He spent a lot of time making this trailer, as is the case with his manifesto, so it was important that is shown. It will shed light on who he is and what he represents. Had you expected such a strong reaction as the one seen? Sorry, what did you say? Had you expected such a strong reaction from his side? Well, I hadn't really given much thought to that, how he would respond or react. Adresseavisen in Trondheim, could you tell us a little bit about the reason why you chose to play the recording with the Renate Tornes, the telephone conversation? We, like everyone else here, this recording is quite tough to listen to, and that's one of the reasons why we wished to play it. It gives an authentic description of the situation, what it was like for her and others being inside the cafe building, and we believe that this is useful information for the court to bear in mind when talking to Breivik. And this information, as this sound recording, also gives important information when we are later to talk to those who were injured but survived the acts committed inside the cafe building. So that's basically the reason for playing this recording. Well, just let me add, more along the same lines as the film, the trailer. It's been a difficult discussion and deliberation. These are things that we have assessed backwards and forwards, and we ended up and concluded that this was important, as my colleague mentioned, that this is on the basis of thorough deliberation. From the Financial Times, Martin Sandbo, when there are two psychiatric evaluations with opposite conclusions, you would think that was up to the prosecution then, or it gives the prosecution the opportunity of opting for your plea. You've chosen to stick to your initial one on criminal insanity? Does this mean that you want a decision of criminal insanity is preferable? No, then I don't think you've understood the whole procedure. When this indictment was issued, we only had one psychiatric report number one, which concluded that the defendant was criminally insane. Hence, our indictment had to be issued on that basis. We didn't know what the report number 2 would conclude. Hence, we expressed our reservation that because it could be possible that we would find ourselves in the situation we are in today, that the second report would conclude differently. And we have communicated to the media. It seems not clearly enough, but we clearly stated that when report number 2 was issued, we don't need to change the indictment. Since we have expressed the reservation, we can claim for regular punishment or criminal preventive detention. The provisions, the legal provisions, the grounds are identical, whether it be a claim for punishment and preventive detention or compulsory psychiatric health care. So this allows, the indictment allows for both solutions, and we haven't opted for either one. And we'll do that when we finally submit our final request after our closing arguments. When we were in a situation where we had to issue the indictment, we only had report number 1. If we had waited for report number 2, we wouldn't have been in court today. We wouldn't have been able to organize a trial now, because we would have to have waited until the conclusions of the second psychiatric report. So that's why we started off with the one based on criminal insanity, with the reservation of an opposite. You talk about punishment or preventive detention. What will determine your claim either way? For a regular punishment or preventive detention? Well, here we have one question which is sort of a borderline case, bordering on to psychiatry, and what our final request or petition will be. And I think what we're going to say to all questions of that nature is that we will not make an ongoing assessment of where we believe Breivik to be positioned in that picture or in that context. We, of course, make our own assessments as the proceedings move on, but we will not communicate those assessments to the public. We will have to complete all the presentation of evidence first before we can give a sound or good answer to what our position will be. Yes, but that's to whether he's insane or sane. But if he is criminally or legally sane. Okay, let me complete my answer. Preventive detention or punishment? If he is found to be legally sane. Well, that's also a question that we will have to wait with until we come to our closing arguments. So we'll take that when the time comes. But if you're wondering the difference between a claim for preventive detention or a punishment, punishment is a prison term of a certain number of years. But if we have the alternative of preventive detention for sane criminals where there's a serious risk of repeated crimes, preventive detention can be requested. That's the difference between the two. Sorry. Yes, it's obvious that it says in the report that there is a fear of repetition. So, yes, I understand.
Okay.
Siv Sandvik, NRK, Breivik has, through his defense counsel, expressed the wish to make a 30-minute presentation before he gives his statement. How do you respond to that? We have no strong thoughts on that score, and we've also noted that the judge announced that she would give an answer to that request tomorrow morning. So we have no strong opinions in that score. How do you plan to organize tomorrow's proceedings? What kind of questions do you plan to put to Breivik tomorrow? Well, I think we'll have to wait till tomorrow and see what comes up. Krokfjord from Dagbladet. As we've heard here, the debate on different levels, psychiatry or not, but the core of the matter is, what's it like to work with such a horrible material, read an indictment containing such horrible information, atrocities as it contains? Yes, it's demanding. But my colleague, Mr. Holden, and I have worked in this field for quite some time, and we've sort of trained a certain professional role. But I think you wouldn't believe us if we claim that this doesn't affect us in any way. But we have to handle this in a professional way and within the framework that the prosecuting authority is to work within. What's the most difficult to remove yourself from? Well, when we go through the indictment and the case itself and its documents, we are also struck by the large number of people affected. I think that's the toughest part of it all, not only for us, but for everyone, the enormous extent, not just one killing, one murder, but the large number of people involved. Asbjørn Olsen from TV2. It's been pretty tough reading today. What can the Norwegian people expect tomorrow? It's going to be even worse. Well, tomorrow's proceedings has a slightly different character. We'll start our questioning of Breivik himself. So we will be hearing examination of the defendant, and with not very many visual aids involved. So we'll see what he has to say about in response to the questions put to him.
Any other questions to the prosecution? Nina Rostrup, Dagsavisen. Will it have no consequences for the presentation of evidence that you haven't decided whether or not you will present the request for criminal sanity or not? What did you say? Will you present exactly the same evidence regardless of your plea? Well, our focus is now to elucidate the case as best as possible, whether he is criminally sane or not. So this is all about elucidating the case, and not about how we present the evidence. Any more questions to the prosecution authority? Yes, just to go back to the CCTV footage, we do see people actually dying on film, for real. Have you clarified this with the surviving relatives? Did they know that you would be showing this today? We knew that playing the Oslo footage and also the sound recording from Utøya would cause strong reactions among those who had their loved ones there. Therefore, we have in advance contacted everyone involved in the government office district, everyone who were directly affected by the footage, either surviving relatives or those injured. They have been offered to view the footage first, and to the best of my knowledge, most have accepted this offer. And we did the same with the footage or the recording from Utøya. Everyone concerned have had the opportunity of listening to the recording in advance. The same applied to everyone who were injured in the cafe. Everyone has had the opportunity to listen to the recording before it was played in court. All right, then we will conclude the questions to the prosecution and then change the scene and invite the defense. Questions for the defense? Anyone? Siri Andersen Verdensgang. We expected that you would ask Breivik why he cried. What did he say? Well, he answered us, but I don't think that I should actually divulge information from client conversation. He has the opportunity to testify over the next few days. I'm sure that he will also touch upon this. But from an overall point of view, part of the explanation may be, as I have said repeatedly to the press, that he committed these acts that he characterized as horrendous but necessary to prevent war in Europe. And those were the sentiment that came up. And he has empathy when this is shown, but when the footage and the sound recording are played, he doesn't show any emotion. What's it like to be sitting next to him and defending him? Well, I and we have worked with this duty for quite some time. We were prepared. We have also tried to prepare ourselves for what will transpire here in court. Yes. You said that you received a pile of documents just before the weekend. How likely is it that you will ask for postponement? We have informed the court about the state of affairs, that a large quantity of documents has recently been received. We don't know what they contain. We have a fair amount of knowledge about the topics. So it could be that maybe we need to present new evidence or actually to compile new evidence. We have informed the court. Should there be anything that give rise to other measures, we will have to address that. But at the moment, we don't believe it. What kind of topics are you talking about? It's an analysis of Knights Templar, amongst others. That is important for our defense. And also in internet traffic data, which websites he had visited, his use of social media network. Concerning those documents, it's not only for us to review them, but we also need to discuss this with our client, and therefore it's important to reserve the right in such respect. Yes, from ZDF, German television. My colleague who is outside would like to ask about the initial objections to the competence of the court. The main judge's impartiality, and we also knew that it was not a formal objection that was raised, more like a question. But what is behind this? Could you please, in simple terms, try to explain this to non-Norwegians? And is this something that may come up in the form of a formal objection later? No, I don't think so. This was not presented as a formal objection, more like a point of information that he wanted to make in court this morning. We hadn't discussed that beforehand. We discussed it during our proceedings during the court, so there was no formal objection. Can you explain us what is behind it? What he said about the acquaintances? No, I cannot go into detail. And the case that this court was not the proper venue. Can you comment, please? Well, his point of departure is that he is at war. And in his opinion, it would be more appropriate to be before a war tribunal. But that is what has prompted his comment. Ole Tornil Pedersen, NTB News Agency. Lippestad, you have said that Breivik's statement may be difficult and enrage people. You said that before. beforehand. But is there any topics, any special features or way he appears in court that you have discussed, that you have warned him against, that you have addressed beforehand? Or made any restrictions on? We will not divulge any information from the talks we have had with our client. What I have said earlier is that in his statement he will spend quite a lot of time on talking about things that may be hard for people to listen to. He will start testifying tomorrow. And of course, the senior public prosecutor will start putting questions to him. It will follow the list of topics as he outlined, and then we'll see how things develop. Yes, Nerve TV2. He will start his testimony tomorrow, and that will also be important concerning the question of criminal insanity. Can you tell us about what advice you have given him about how he is going to present his testimony? I don't really want to divulge information from the client counsel talks. We have reviewed the type of questions that he is likely to have. We have reviewed and discussed 2 expert reports. He knows the topics, he knows what they have given weight to, but we will not go into detail about how he is going to testify. It is the scope of this case is simply too much. TV2. You have the people who have known him for a long time. I mean, is this kind of smiley eyes? Does that mean that he is content with what he has achieved or the way he has done? Well, I don't think that we, counsels for defense, are the right people to judge his conduct in court. The members of the court will necessarily do that. We also have 4 experts that will give their interpretations when they are going to present their advice to the court.
Bloomberg News. Can you give us any more information on this document Breivik plans to read tomorrow? I mean, I'm assuming you've read it. What kind of topics does it cover?
Well, tomorrow he is going to start his testimony and we will not anticipate it. But you may call it a summary, a brief summary of what he wants to communicate to us through his testimony. But I don't think it would be appropriate for me to say any more. Well, from Adresseavisen, did Breivik have any comments to what the prosecution presented in their opening statement today? He did have that, but again, those are privileged conversations between us and Breivik. Martin Sandby from Financial Times. Geir Lippestad. You said today that your client wants to be adjudicated as criminally sane. Can you formally confirm that this is contrary to what we heard from the prosecution, that you will argue for a specific conclusion, namely that he is legally responsible? Can you also tell us about the experts on extreme political views in your witness list? How can that contribute to your view, and how can that be used as an argument for criminal sanity? I can confirm that we will work to have him adjudicated as criminally sane. Beginning to present arguments for how we're going to do that would be anticipating things. We're going to hear his testimony, and also we will hear what the 4 experts who have written the reports have, and then we will have to come back to your question if necessary. Bakkefoss, Aftenposten. Several media are now reporting that Breivik, following the film where he cried, has told the world that he cried because it is an emotional film. Can you confirm us that that is correct, that that was why he cried, because it was an emotional film? It is... I will never disclose what we speak with our client on, and I strongly react to the way it is interpreted based on contents that we have with our client.
Yeah, okay. From the National Television of China, CCTV, I have a question. You are arguing that Breivik wants to be considered criminally sane, but that's against the normal logic, because normally somebody who did something would want to be considered criminally insane, so they get a lesser punishment. So in this case, is he aware of the fact that he will be given a more severe punishment, or that is not a possibility in this particular case? What is his aim? Does he want to sit in jail and be considered a hero, or does he dream to get out after 21 years?
He is fully aware of what the difference will mean, whether or not he will be transferred to compulsory mental health care, or if he is to be transferred to serve time in prison. He is fully aware of that. And up until fairly recently, he has been clear that and said that he was not really concerned about whether or not he were to be rendered legally sane or insane. But after the psychiatric expert reports and following the debate regarding his sanity, he concluded that it was important for him to be adjudicated as criminally sane. Of course, he does have his motivation for that wish, but in general, I believe that I can only say that the outcome of this trial is not the most important thing. French radio, how much can you discuss with him during the trial? Are you free to talk to him in all breaks? Can you discuss with him in the evening? How is your contact with him over the next few days? We do talk to him during breaks. We are fully able to do so. And we can also go visit him and speak to him on the phone.
In the evenings this week, can we do that? Yes, we consider that on an ongoing basis. Guy Lepper, you touched on this earlier, but let me ask you once again, how do you view your work? What is your aim? What is your objective in this trial? Is it he has pleaded innocent on the basis of his theory for that? Is your aim is to plead not guilty? No, we have two aims in this trial. He has not pleaded guilty. He has pleaded innocent, not guilty, and he has invoked, as we heard, legitimate self-defense. And
if you're just joining us here on France 24, you've been watching the press conference of chief prosecutors and defence lawyers following the first day of proceedings in the trial of Norway terrorist Anders Behring Breivik. Addressing the court today, the 33-year-old admitted to planning and executing the bomb and shooting massacre that killed 77 people last July, but he insisted he'd acted in self-defence to protect his country from what he describes as the perils of multiculturalism. Well, journalists first asked prosecutors about their decision to play the propaganda video edited by Breivik, but also a recorded emergency phone call made by one of the young women who was on the island as Breivik methodically hunted down the young people taking part in that political holiday camp. The prosecutors also reminded journalists of the two sentencing options regarding Breivik. The first, if he's considered mentally sane, is a 21-year jail sentence. The second, if he's considered insane, is indefinite medical detention. Well, the press also questioned Breivik's right to address the court, an opportunity he's expected to use to put forward his extremist views. Well, as for Breivik's defence lawyers, they came back on their client's comments this Monday when he told the court that he didn't recognise its authority, but refused to be drawn into explaining and commenting that further. The defence also warned that some of their client's views may be hard to hear for Norwegians following the trial. Well, with us in the studio is France 24's Christopher Moore. Chris, hello, you've been listening to that with me. The lawyers for both sides didn't give much away, actually, did they? But the questions by journalists were quite telling.
That's right, especially in response to Breivik's reaction to the screening of his 12-minute sort of ideological anti-Islam video, if you like. He was pictured crying after that. Lawyers not saying much about that. Obviously, the press very interested. The defence, as you expect, pretty guarded there in terms of the private conversations they've had with Breivik. He, of course, is expected to take the stand tomorrow, and they're giving away very few details as to what he's likely to say. We think, of course, that he's going to use this as an opportunity to justify these very, very strong far-right views which he holds. One thing in terms of the defence there, they were asked about the fact that some documents they received were only given to them a couple of days ago. There's an issue there that they perhaps may need more time to look after them. This could lead to some kind of hold-up in the trial. Now, before that, we heard from the prosecution, the journalists interested there really in exactly why this film, which Breivik had posted on the internet, was shown. The prosecution lawyers there responding that, this is his trial. We're going to find out what kind of man he is, and that video is very much part of it. As you said, that telephone conversation played in court, pretty harrowing one of a young girl who was holed up in a bathroom on Utoya Island. The shootings went on outside, and the lawyers saying, well, the court needs to hear that just to understand what it was like on that island at that time.
OK, Christopher Moore, thank you very much for your analysis. That's where we're leaving this special edition. Please stay tuned to France 24. There's more coming up in just 20 minutes.